Welcome back to the Principles of Change podcast, where we dive into stories of leadership, innovation, and transformation in schools. I'm your host, Lee from SmartPass. Today, we're joined by Derek Stampone, an assistant principal at the High School of Fashion Industries, right in the heart of New York City's garment district. Derek helps lead a dynamic school of over 1,600 students in a unique setting, a 10-story building where students major in everything from fashion design to software development. Today, we'll chat about how he's navigating leadership in such a creative environment and the unique challenges he faces. Get ready for another episode of Principles of Change.
How you doing, Lee?
I am doing good. We were just talking about how it's nice weather, but it's always changing here in New York.
It certainly is. It certainly is. You wake up in the morning, you need long pajamas on, you get home, and you got to put on your swim trunks.
So I'd love to start by you having us tell our listeners about the High School of Fashion Industries, because it was once described as the Hogwarts of fashion. And that's a pretty big deal because the New York Times called you that. So why are you the Hogwarts of fashion?
So the story of the High School of Fashion Industries goes back about 100 years. Originally, we were a school where young women, fresh off the boat on Ellis Island, would come to our school, learn the fine details on how to be seamstresses. They'd graduate, they'd go up 7th Avenue and get a job. And obviously, over the course of that history, the school's changed a lot. We became like an official public high school with all the other classes. So yes, while we may be the Hogwarts of fashion, we still have chemistry labs and mathematical proofs and all of that good stuff. The school was originally the Central Needle Trades, eventually renamed the High School of Fashion Industries. We've been at our current location since World War II. We have some really amazing public works type a mural in our auditorium that's incredible. And the school's kind of evolved over the years, right? Originally, it was very much about the hands-on skills needed to get a job right out of high school. Some of our old majors include making hats, working with leather and fur, and jewelry making down in our basement. But as we've evolved with the times, right, and sort of aligning our mission to college and career ready, rolling in some of our other majors. Our newest major, as you highlighted, is software development. And, we're coming up on our 100th anniversary, our graduating class of 2026. And really you can see just the American story, right? Following the arc of the school. One way that, we're the Hogwarts of fashion, students spend all 4 years building up those skills and becoming creatives. And the past couple of years, we've culminated their work in the meatpacking district with an outdoor fashion show. That New York Times article highlights that was a spot, I believe Vogue had done a fashion show a couple of weeks earlier. So it's a really unique thing. And probably my favorite part about it is it's a public high school. A lot of people, if you talk about this school outside of the 5 boroughs, they'll ask about it. Is that a private school? How does someone get in there? But we have students coming all the way from Riverdale in the Bronx, Far Rockaway in Queens, Tottenville and Staten Island, and sort of everything in between. And that sort of bringing together of students from all over really also is kind of like a Hogwarts vibe too, right? It's like these students get admitted, they get their letter, right, from the owl. And like they're coming together and like traveling here on the train. They don't have to get on platform 9 3/4, but they still have to come from far. And that, creates a lot of opportunity for our students and a lot of challenges for the faculty here, right? From the teaching staff to administration. But that's a little bit about the sort of the High School of Fashion Industries from its inception. A few blocks from here was the original building to now our beautiful, building. It's an awesome place to work.
So there's many differences obviously between you and Hogwarts, but you already mentioned it, is that you do teach, real classes too. Mm-hmm. I know in Hogwarts, Harry Potter stopped learning math and writing and reading at a young age. But you mentioned, this is a public school. This is also a place. This is a school at the end of the day. So I'm curious, how do you, in a school where you have all these careers and in a school where so many people are pursuing creative careers or trades or really practical skills like that and creativity, how do you balance that with academic success?
I think one thing to keep in mind, right, something kind of unique to New York City and maybe other large metro school districts is like even the concept of a major is something that is pretty unique. And even some of the other schools that may have a major, it's not as in depth as ours. Like we really have we have a state certified program bringing students from when they step in the door in ninth grade all the way through senior year. And so even though students are drawn to our school for their majors, they don't all go on to study that once they're done here. And in many ways, that's probably one of the more beautiful parts of it all is that opportunity to experience something this unique with our incredible connections, like up the block, up at FIT and those sorts of things, but in a public school setting where they're not paying for college credits, for example. So one piece is while students are drawn here for it, they're still motivated here to sort of build up those other skills and set themselves up for college admissions. Another thing that is we're always working on, and we've done some really great stuff in the past couple years, is like taking that connection to their major and bringing it into those other classes, right? That dream, right, of like that interdisciplinary school, right? Almost going back to the one room schoolhouse in the sense of like a through line across all of these subjects. So some things we've done, for example, is last year we launched a math elective sequence. One semester, students took both of them, one in financial literacy, right, aligned to our business major and sort of even all of our majors, that entrepreneurial approach, right, and thinking about math through that lens. And then a more art-specific one about geometric design, right, where a bunch of really awesome math teachers at the school, took their love of geometry and thought about how do we connect that to the artistic side of things, right? And they've done some really amazing projects. And I remember one thing I got to see was around tiling patterns and connecting that to what you would see in the Middle East, for example. So that's one place, those explicit, here are courses that we are designing in a way that align with interests you already have. And we're always looking to grow those things. A new one that we have this year, building off of that, is one of our science teachers. She's introduced a textiles elective where they're looking at the chemistry and science behind textiles and textile dyeing. We have a fantastic new facility in the building up on the 9th floor, a fab lab, we're calling it. And it has 3D printers, it has a large format printer, and it has the proper equipment one would use in order to dye fabrics. And so a really awesome direct connection. And what we did there from an administrative standpoint, organizing it, we collabed with those teachers. And what we did is we scheduled those students to be with this same teacher in their fashion class, their third period of fashion class, and then this teacher, right? So really building that synergy with that cohort of students and those two teachers really working together to make this awesome opportunity. So those are some of the things that we do in order to bring the math and the science to a group of students who at first glance, you wouldn't think that would be, their top interest.
Yeah. So saying that back to you, you've really honed in on not only finding a way for students to get excited about the main subjects by connecting it with them, but you're at the same time giving them practical skills beyond high school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, those are just a couple of examples, and specifically thinking in the math and science. My experience at the school, I came here in 2015 and I was the physics teacher, and they had not previously had physics at this school since 2006, right? So they decided, look, we want to bring this back at the school. And the perception would be, what are you doing, bringing physics to the high school fashion industries? And part of our work here, right, is sort of breaking that mindset and showing those connections that are there. Because ultimately, especially if this is the last math or science or whatever class they're gonna take, right? Because they go off to college and they're gonna specialize even more. We want that to be an experience that's shows them that could be them. right? And that's a lot of work we've done as well, is breaking the mold of like, I can't be a mathematician. Mathematicians don't look like me. They don't sound like me. They're not like me. And so that's a place that why we find it so important to still bring these opportunities to the students.
Nice. Well, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we're back. Let's jump into changing the game, where we spotlight the all-star plays and different ways principals are leveling up their school communities. All right, Derek. So we just talked about how diverse your school really is in terms of where they're coming from geographically, but it's fashion, it's design, now software development. What is a key change you made at the high school of fashion industries that you're especially proud of?
I think one thing that we worked really hard on in a post-pandemic landscape is the work we've done to involve students in the decision-making process at our school. You know, we had started to lay that groundwork back in like 2018, but really in the years since, we've found really authentic ways to involve students in all aspects of the school and really letting their voice lead us in the types of changes that we want to do. And ultimately, the policies or the ideas that we're trying to bring to the students, like it needs to sort of meet them where they are and help us get them to where they want to go. And so one thing that we've done is we've implemented these teacher-student teams where there's an equal partnership, an equal voice between a number of students and a number of teachers, where they meet monthly to talk about like a wide variety of issues, sort of aligned to the area of the school they want to see the most improvement. And I think this is one we're particularly proud of because it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work bringing in students to be involved in this, right? You're doubling the number of voices, and that isn't always easy. Organizing it, right? Finding these students and connecting them with what they're interested in and making sure that they come in and like all of those things, right? Those like logistics things that like need to happen. They're not glitzy or glamorous, but like they're important. So that was something that we put a lot of effort into. And then, you know, making sure we follow through on like what's talked about. One example that my group worked on last year was we met with students to talk about our going out to lunch policy. And it's the kind of policy where from a faculty perspective, you initially think, well, we really want to reward kids for doing the right thing. And oftentimes you get drawn to things like the students are on honor roll, the students have perfect attendance. And what ends up happening is we're setting up a group of students who 100% can meet that, and it's easy for them. And then you got a group of students who like, it's just not in the cards for them. And so by talking with this group of teachers and students, we came to realize, well, one, who are we excluding with a policy like this? The students asked about the data. I said, I'll bring you the data, right? I enjoyed the accountability part of it. I brought it in and we looked at it and we saw some of our students with disabilities were being excluded at a really high rate, right? The challenges around attendance, right, felt more punitive than it did supportive. And we made some shifts. And the leadership at the school, right, when I brought this to the principal, he said, yeah, we need to have a policy that is going to reward students, but also motivate them. And so this group, right, that I'm really proud of, where we, again, equal partnership between students and teachers, we came to decide, look, what is actually the really important thing? The really important thing is honor roll is awesome, but we want students passing their classes, right? So we changed that criteria. And then with our attendance fees, we said, look, we want to make sure students are showing up to all of their classes on time. So we shifted that from a, are you present for the day type measure, right? We're a bunch of students who struggle to get here on time, but we want to motivate them to change that mindset. We're sort of being eligible, and we changed it to say, look, we're looking for you to have good attendance for every class of the day. And, you know, and in that shift, it wasn't like a giant number of students now became eligible. However, the conversation shifted because previously students would feel like it is what it is. I'm either going to get it or I'm not, to, oh, what things can I change? What things can I improve? So now I'll become eligible. because the last part of the criteria was it updated every marking period, right? That opportunity to go, you get that fresh start, you're able to turn it around. And yeah, we didn't have a big jump right from the beginning, but students really felt like, hey, this is a thing I could dream for, I could go for. And by the end of the school year, we had more students eligible under this criteria than we did under the previous one. And it, again, felt like we were actually motivating students to do something. And all of that came from a meeting of students and teachers to talk about this, and being able to hear an authentic student perspective got that ball rolling. And now we're able to build off of it, because that's something we can point to when groups meet this year to say, hey, you think, right, we've all thought this before, how much voice do I really have? What can I really influence on here? Well, it turns out you actually can influence a lot. And that's just one of a couple of really great examples from the past couple of years where student voice was listened to in a really authentic way.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent example of, yes, you listened to the student voice, you found a way to get the teacher voices and the student voices and be constructive about it. But something else you hit on was you also had the data behind it and the data combine. So I'm very curious, did that help you structure the feedback you were getting for students? Did that help you make the feedback from students a bit more informative or critical? How did you use that?
Well, one thing that can be pretty interesting, right, is in any organization, right, and in many ways, schools are organizations on steroids, right? Because think about the number of people in our building. There was a range of opinions, right? There are people that are saying honor roll's not hard enough. Like, this should be for even higher GPAs, right? But so what the data was able to do was to provide a little bit of grounding and like common fact amongst all of us versus whatever the perception is, right? Oh, well, I've noticed in my group of friends this, or I've noticed in my class this. And sometimes people aren't exposed to like the subgroups of interest that we're always talking about, right, across schools. So that was one way that data was really helpful, is it opened up some eyes around some of the gaps that if you're not directly experiencing it, like, you're not going to see. And that's been a strategy we've taken, not just in that group or those student groups, but trying to expand in all aspects of what we're doing. We've all heard the phrase before, right? Perception is reality. There's a lot of truth to that. However, one way to combat that is like by bringing in that data. And even with students, you may be surprised, right? But that can be a reality, that sometimes the students can be harsher critics in either direction than maybe a more nuanced or considered adult might be. And the data is able to help with that.
So looking ahead, is there a certain trend in education or in your school specifically or anything like that that you're especially excited for or focusing on in the upcoming school years?
I think in terms of trends, I think a well talked about one, right, is artificial intelligence and AI. And I think that for not just our school specifically, but I think high schools in general is sort of hitting this inflection point where it's becoming so easy to use AI, right? And in a way that is just interfering with the learning process, right? And I think it's something, it's not new to AI, this idea that like new pieces of technology come along and they provide a shortcut, right, from A to B that can be useful when you already know how to get from A to B. But when you're in the process of learning those things, right, it's going to leave you with like gaps in your knowledge. And in a world where I believe things like video, artificial intelligence, like, we're right on the edge of that really taking off in a way that it's going to be very difficult to separate truth from reality in that front. And I think that that's something schools have always struggled with, right? Addressing that sort of thing. And the speed at which AI is picking up is becoming very troubling, right? In terms of like what schools are going to do. Bringing that back to like, okay, AI is not going anywhere, right? Pick your metaphor, Pandora's box is open, the tube is out of the toothpaste, right? Whatever you want to say. But what we know is that when we bring students together in classrooms to engage critically with things that matter to them, right? That they're able to learn those skills, to become critical thinkers, and to hopefully kind of inoculate themselves from being manipulated. So for me, I see, right, in my role at the school where I'm scheduling students, I'm attendance and data and testing, and I see my role in all of this is getting students to be in their classes on time every day so they get the full experience of what our amazing teachers are doing in the classrooms, but then also to continue to create rigorous classwork opportunities for them to challenge themselves and to grow, academically, and the soft skills that are like connected to it. That in a sort of high stakes educational environment, we get really fixated on the skills and really laser focused on like this standard and that standard and reaching mastery and all of that. But to get there, students have to know how to be students. They have to know how to be people. They have to care for one another. And what I know is those things have to happen in like learning communities, right? Groups of students together. And my concern is that things like artificial intelligence and other technologies sort of fracture that and get in the way. And students stop seeing themselves as like learners. And it's more about like getting it done, getting the grade and earning the credit and being done with it. And so it's a big challenge. And I think it's important to articulate, like, it's not new. What's new is maybe the precipitating event or what's underlying it or causing it in the moment. But what's underlying it is since schools have been schools. And the more sort of diverse a group of students are across all of the different facets, right? Each one of these students are individuals. They all bring different hopes and dreams to that classroom. Like, the harder and harder that gets, but it's a challenge that we're up for. The issue being like just like the uncertainty, around like what all of that's going to look like. We have a phrase at our school, like when we talk about cell phones, for example, it's like use technology for good and not for evil, right? But the reality is like it's not that simple. And ultimately, it's a place of learning, and it's a place where we have to provide opportunities for students to learn and how to be good people, good citizens, and wanting to learn. It's a place that AI can really get at, right? If students are doing it not because they want to learn, but because they want to just be done with it, it can be a challenge. But I'm really inspired by many of our students and our teachers who, in spite of those challenges, right, are finding ways to still be inspired by what they're doing. And it really is something incredible to see, going into a classroom, especially bringing it back to the what makes the school special, going into those career and technical education classrooms and really seeing the creativity, driving these students to sort of create things that no one's ever created before. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and something that I don't think AI is going to be able to replace.
Yes.
But it's interesting stuff. And I do think we are at an interesting inflection point. The big one for me is like when it shifts from students knowing a world before a piece of technology to when they don't know a world without it. So we're maybe a couple of years away from when the AI thing is going to be really interesting, right? Because again, kids will have grown up only knowing it. And we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We always do. It's what we have to do. But there's a lot to be done there, and it's definitely a thing I'm keeping my eye on.
Well, it's definitely something we are going to be continuing to explore on our podcast here. Derek, thank you so much for an insightful conversation. And thank you all for listening. I will see you for another episode of Principles of Change next time. So